Sociology is the scientific study of society, including patterns of social relationships, social interaction, and culture. It is a social science that uses various methods of empirical investigation and critical analysis to develop a body of knowledge about social order, acceptance, and change. Many sociologists aim to conduct research that may be applied directly to social policy and welfare, while others focus primarily on refining the theoretical understanding of social processes. Subject matter ranges from the micro-sociology level of individual agency and interaction to the macro level of systems and the social structure. The traditional focuses of sociology include social stratification, social class, social mobility, religion, secularization, law, sexuality, and deviance. As all spheres of human activity are affected by the interplay between social structure and individual agency, sociology has gradually expanded its focus to other subjects, such as health, medical, economy, military and penal institutions, the Internet, education, social capital, and the role of social activity in the development of scientific knowledge. The range of social scientific methods has also expanded. Social researchers draw upon a variety of qualitative and quantitative techniques. The linguistic and cultural turns of the mid-20th century led to increasingly interpretative, hermeneutic, and philosophic approaches towards the analysis of society. Conversely, the end of the 1990s and the beginning of 2000s have seen the rise of new analytically, mathematically, and computationally rigorous techniques, such as agent-based modeling and social network analysis. Social research informs politicians and policymakers, educators, planners, legislators, administrators, developers, business magnates, managers, social workers, non-governmental organizations, non-profit organizations, and people interested in resolving social issues in general. There is often a great deal of crossover between social research, market research, and other statistical fields. Classification. Sociology is distinguished from various general social studies courses, which bear little relation to sociological theory or to social science research methodology. The U.S. National Science Foundation classifies sociology as a STEM field. History. Origins. Sociological reasoning predates the foundation of the discipline. Social analysis has origins in the common stock of Western knowledge and philosophy, and has been carried out from as far back as the time of ancient Greek philosopher Plato, if not before. The origin of the survey, i.e., the collection of information from a sample of individuals, can be traced back to at least the Doomsday Book in 1086, while ancient philosophers such as Confucius wrote on the importance of social roles. There is evidence of early sociology in medieval Arab writings. Some sources consider Ibn Khaldun, a 14th-century Arab Islamic scholar from North Africa, Tunisia, to have been the first sociologist and father of sociology. See branches of the early Islamic philosophy. His Muqaddimah was perhaps the first work to advance social scientific reasoning on social cohesion and social conflict. The word sociology, or sociology, is derived from both Latin and Greek origins. The Latin word, socius, companion, the suffix logi, the study of from Greek lambda omicron gamma alpha from lambda gamma omicron, logos, word, knowledge. It was first coined in 1780 by the French essayist Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, 1748–1836, in an unpublished manuscript. Sociology was later defined independently by the French philosopher of science, Auguste Comte, 1798–1857, in 1838. Comte used this term to describe a new way of looking at society. Comte had earlier used the term social physics, but that had subsequently been appropriated by others, most notably the Belgian statistician Adolphe Quetelet. Comte endeavored to unify history, psychology, and economics through the scientific understanding of the social realm. Writing shortly after the malaise of the French Revolution, he proposed that social ills could be remedied through sociological positivism, an epistemological approach outlined in the course in Positive Philosophy, 1830-1842, and A General View of Positivism, 1848. Comte believed a positivist stage would mark the final era, after conjectural theological and metaphysical phases, in the progression of human understanding. In observing the circular dependence of theory and observation in science, and having classified the sciences, Comte may be regarded as the first philosopher of science in the modern sense of the term. Comte gave a powerful impetus to the development of sociology, an impetus which bore fruit in the later decades of the 19th century. To say this is certainly not to claim that French sociologists such as Durkheim were devoted disciples of the high priest of positivism. But by insisting on the irreducibility of each of his basic sciences to the particular science of sciences which it presupposed in the hierarchy, and by emphasizing the nature of sociology as the scientific study of social phenomena, Comte put sociology on the map. To be sure, beginnings can be traced back well beyond Montesquieu, for example, and to Condorcet, not to speak of Saint-Simon, Comte's immediate predecessor. But Comte's clear recognition of sociology as a particular science, with a character of its own, justified Durkheim in regarding him as the father or founder of this science, in spite of the fact that Durkheim did not accept the idea of the three states and criticized Comte's approach to sociology. Frederick Copleston, A History of Philosophy, 9 Modern Philosophy 1974. Both Auguste Comte and Karl Marx, 1818–1883, set out to develop scientifically justified systems in the wake of European industrialization and secularization, informed by various key movements in the philosophies of history and science. Marx rejected Comtean positivism, but in attempting to develop a science of society nevertheless came to be recognized as a founder of sociology as the word gained wider meaning. For Isaiah Berlin, Marx may be regarded as the true father of modern sociology, insofar as anyone can claim the title. To have given clear and unified answers in familiar empirical terms to those theoretical questions which most occupied men's minds at the time, and to have deduced from them clear practical directives without creating obviously artificial links between the two, was the principal achievement of Marx's theory. The sociological treatment of historical and moral problems, which Comte, and after him, Spencer and Taine, had discussed and mapped, became a precise and concrete study only when the attack of militant Marxism made its conclusions a burning issue, and so made the search for evidence more zealous and the attention to method more intense. Isaiah Berlin, Karl Marx, His Life and Environment 1937. Herbert Spencer, April 27, 1820 – December 8, 1903, was one of the most popular and influential 19th-century sociologists. It is estimated that he sold 1 million books in his lifetime, far more than any other sociologist at the time. So strong was his influence that many other 19th-century thinkers, including Émile Durkheim, defined their ideas in relation to his. Durkheim's division of labor in society is to a large extent an extended debate with Spencer, from whose sociology, many commentators now agree, Durkheim borrowed extensively. Also a notable biologist, Spencer coined the term survival of the fittest. While Marxian ideas defined one strand of sociology, Spencer was a critic of socialism as well as strong advocate for a laissez-faire style of government. His ideas were highly observed by conservative political circles, especially in the United States and England. Foundations of the academic discipline. The first formal department of sociology in the world was established by Albion Small, at the invitation of William Rainey Harper, at the University of Chicago in 1892, and the American Journal of Sociology was founded shortly thereafter in 1895, by Small as well. However, the institutionalization of sociology as an academic discipline was chiefly led by Émile Durkheim, 1858–1917, who developed positivism as a foundation to practical social research. While Durkheim rejected much of the detail of Comte's philosophy, he retained and refined its method, maintaining that the social sciences are a logical continuation of the natural ones into the realm of human activity, and insisting that they may retain the same objectivity, rationalism, and approach to causality. Durkheim set up the first European department of sociology at the University of Bordeaux in 1895, publishing his Rules of the Sociological Method, 1895. For Durkheim, sociology could be described as the science of institutions, their genesis, and their functioning. Durkheim's monograph, Suicide, 1897, is considered a seminal work in statistical analysis by contemporary sociologists. Suicide is a case study of variations in suicide rates among Catholic and Protestant populations, and served to distinguish sociological analysis from psychology or philosophy. It also marked a major contribution to the theoretical concept of structural functionalism. By carefully examining suicide statistics in different police districts, he attempted to demonstrate that Catholic communities have a lower suicide rate than that of Protestants, something he attributed to social, as opposed to individual or psychological, causes. He developed the notion of objective sui generis social facts to delineate a unique empirical object for the science of sociology to study. Through such studies he posited that sociology would be able to determine whether any given society is healthy or pathological, and seek social reform to negate organic breakdown or social anomie. Sociology quickly evolved as an academic response to the perceived challenges of modernity, such as industrialization, urbanization, secularization, and the process of rationalization. The field predominated in continental Europe, with British anthropology and statistics generally following on a separate trajectory. By the turn of the 20th century, however, many theorists were active in the English-speaking world. Few early sociologists were confined strictly to the subject, interacting also with economics, jurisprudence, psychology, and philosophy, with theories being appropriated in a variety of different fields. Since its inception, sociological epistemology, methods, and frames of inquiry have significantly expanded and diverged. Durkheim, Marx, and the German theorist Max Weber, 1864–1920, are typically cited as the three principal architects of sociology. Herbert Spencer, William Graham Sumner, Lester F. Ward, W. E. B. Du Bois, Wilfried Pareto, Alexis de Tocqueville, Werner Sombart, Thorstein Veblen, Ferdinand Tönnies, George Simmel, and Karl Mannheim are often included on academic curricula as founding theorists. Curricula also may include Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Marianne Weber, and Friedrich Engels as founders of the feminist tradition in sociology. Each key figure is associated with a particular theoretical perspective and orientation. Marx and Engels associated the emergence of modern society above all with the development of capitalism. For Durkheim it was connected in particular with industrialization and the new social division of labor which this brought about. For Weber it had to do with the emergence of a distinctive way of thinking, the rational calculation which he associated with the Protestant ethic, more or less what Marx and Engels speak of in terms of those icy waves of egotistical calculation. Together the works of these great classical sociologists suggest what Giddens has recently described as a multidimensional view of institutions of modernity and which emphasizes not only capitalism and industrialism as key institutions of modernity, but also surveillance, meaning control of information and social supervision, and military power, control of the means of violence in the context of the industrialization of war. John Harris, The Second Great Transformation, Capitalism at the end of the 20th century 1992. Positivism and anti-positivism. Positivism. The overarching methodological principle of positivism is to conduct sociology in broadly the same manner as natural science. An emphasis on empiricism and the scientific method is sought to provide a tested foundation for sociological research based on the assumption that the only authentic knowledge is scientific knowledge, and that such knowledge can only arrive by positive affirmation through scientific methodology. Our main goal is to extend scientific rationalism to human conduct. What has been called our positivism is but a consequence of this rationalism. Émile Durkheim, The Rules of Sociological Method, 1895. The term has long since ceased to carry this meaning. There are no fewer than 12 distinct epistemologies that are referred to as positivism. Many of these approaches do not self-identify as positivist, some because they themselves arose in opposition to older forms of positivism, and some because the label has over time become a term of abuse by being mistakenly linked with a theoretical empiricism. The extent of anti-positivist criticism has also diverged, with many rejecting the scientific method and others only seeking to amend it to reflect 20th century developments in the philosophy of science. However, positivism, broadly understood as a scientific approach to the study of society, remains dominant in contemporary sociology, especially in the United States. Loic Wacquant distinguishes three major strains of positivism: Durkheimian, logical, and instrumental. None of these are the same as that set forth by Comte, who was unique in advocating such a rigid, and perhaps optimistic, version. While Émile Durkheim rejected much of the detail of Comte's philosophy, he retained and refined its method. Durkheim maintained that the social sciences are a logical continuation of the natural ones into the realm of human activity, and insisted that they should retain the same objectivity, rationalism, and approach to causality. He developed the notion of objective sui generis social facts to delineate a unique empirical object for the science of sociology to study. The variety of positivism that remains dominant today is termed instrumental positivism. This approach eschews epistemological and metaphysical concerns, such as the nature of social facts, in favor of methodological clarity, replicability, reliability, and validity. This positivism is more or less synonymous with quantitative research, and so only resembles older positivism in practice. Since it carries no explicit philosophical commitment, its practitioners may not belong to any particular school of thought. Modern sociology of this type is often credited to Paul Lazarsfeld, who pioneered large-scale survey studies and developed statistical techniques for analyzing them. This approach lends itself to what Robert K. Merton called middle-range theory, abstract statements that generalize from segregated hypotheses and empirical regularities rather than starting with an abstract idea of a social whole. Anti-positivism. Reactions against social empiricism began when German philosopher Hegel voiced opposition to both empiricism, which he rejected as uncritical, and determinism, which he viewed as overly mechanistic. Karl Marx's methodology borrowed from Hegelian dialecticism but also a rejection of positivism in favor of critical analysis, seeking to supplement the empirical acquisition of facts with the elimination of illusions. He maintained that appearances need to be critiqued rather than simply documented. Early hermeneutic eons such as Wilhelm pioneered the distinction between natural and social science, Geisteswissenschaft. Various neo-Kantian philosophers, phenomenologists and human scientists further theorized how the analysis of the social world differs to that of the natural world due to the irreducibly complex aspects of human society, culture, and being. At the turn of the 20th century, the first generation of German sociologists formally introduced methodological anti-positivism, proposing that research should concentrate on human cultural norms, values, symbols, and social processes viewed from a resolutely subjective perspective. Max Weber argued that sociology may be loosely described as a science as it is able to identify causal relationships of human social action, especially among ideal types, or hypothetical simplifications of complex social phenomena. As a non-positivist, however, Weber sought relationships that are not as historical, invariant, or generalizable as those pursued by natural scientists. Fellow German sociologist, Ferdinand Tönnies, theorized on two crucial abstract concepts with his work on Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, lit community and society. Tönnies marked a sharp line between the realm of concepts and the reality of social action. The first must be treated axiomatically and in a deductive way, pure sociology, whereas the second empirically and inductively, applied sociology. The science whose object is to interpret the meaning of social action and thereby give a causal explanation of the way in which the action proceeds and the effects which it produces. By action in this definition is meant the human behavior when and to the extent that the agent or agents see it as subjectively meaningful. The meaning to which we refer may be either, a. the meaning actually intended either by an individual agent on a particular historical occasion or by a number of agents on an approximate average in a given set of cases, or, b. the meaning attributed to the agent or agents, as types, in a pure type constructed in the abstract. In neither case is the meaning to be thought of as somehow objectively correct or true by some metaphysical criterion. This is the difference between the empirical sciences of action, such as sociology and history, and any kind of prior discipline, such as jurisprudence, logic, ethics, or aesthetics whose aim is to extract from their subject matter correct or valid meaning. Max Weber, The Nature of Social Action 1922. Both Weber and George Simmel pioneered the Verstehen, or interpretative, method in social science, a systematic process by which an outside observer attempts to relate to a particular cultural group, or indigenous people, on their own terms and from their own point of view. Through the work of Simmel, in particular, sociology acquired a possible character beyond positivist data collection or grand, deterministic systems of structural law. Relatively isolated from the sociological academy throughout his lifetime, Simmel presented idiosyncratic analyses of modernity more reminiscent of the phenomenological and existential writers than of Comte or Durkheim, paying particular concern to the forms of, and possibilities for, social individuality. His sociology engaged in a neo-Kantian inquiry into the limits of perception, asking what is society, in a direct allusion to Kant's question what is nature. The deepest problems of modern life flow from the attempt of the individual to maintain the independence and individuality of his existence against the sovereign powers of society, against the weight of the historical heritage and the external culture and technique of life. The antagonism represents the most modern form of the conflict which primitive man must carry on with nature for his own bodily existence. The 18th century may have called for liberation from all the ties which grew up historically in politics, in religion, in morality, and in economics in order to permit the original natural virtue of man, which is equal in everyone, to develop without inhibition. The 19th century may have sought to promote, in addition to man's freedom, his individuality, which is connected with the division of labor, and his achievements which make him unique and indispensable but which at the same time make him so much the more dependent on the complementary activity of others. Nietzsche may have seen the relentless struggle of the individual as the prerequisite for his full development, while socialism found the same thing in the suppression of all competition, but in each of these the same fundamental motive was at work, namely the resistance of the individual to being leveled, swallowed up in the social technological mechanism. George Simmel, The Metropolis and Mental Life 1903. Other developments. The first college course entitled Sociology was taught in the United States at Yale in 1875 by William Graham Sumner. In 1883 Lester F. Ward, the first president of the American Sociological Association, published dynamic sociology or applied social science as based upon statical sociology and the less complex sciences, and attacked the laissez-faire sociology of Herbert Spencer and Sumner. Ward's 1,200-page book was used as core material in many early American sociology courses. In 1890, the oldest continuing American course in the modern tradition began at the University of Kansas, lectured by Frank W. Blackmar. The Department of Sociology at the University of Chicago was established in 1892 by Albion Small, who also published the first sociology textbook, An Introduction to the Study of Society 1894. George Herbert Mead and Charles Cooley, who had met at the University of Michigan in 1891, along with John Dewey, would move to Chicago in 1894. Their influence gave rise to social psychology and the symbolic interactionism of the modern Chicago school. The American Journal of Sociology was founded in 1895, followed by the American Sociological Association, ASA, in 1905. The sociological canon of classics with Durkheim and Max Weber at the top owes in part to Talcott Parsons, who is largely credited with introducing both to American audiences. Parsons consolidated the sociological tradition and set the agenda for American sociology at the point of its fastest disciplinary growth. Sociology in the United States was less historically influenced by Marxism than its European counterpart, and to this day broadly remains more statistical in its approach. The first sociology department to be established in the United Kingdom was at the London School of Economics and Political Science, home of the British Journal of Sociology, in 1904. Leonard Trelawney Hobhouse and Edward Westermarck became the lecturers in the discipline at the University of London in 1907. Harriet Martineau, an English translator of Comte, has been cited as the first female sociologist. In 1909 the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Soziologie, German Sociological Association, was founded by Ferdinand Tönnies and Max Weber, among others. Weber established the first department in Germany at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich in 1919, having presented an influential new anti-positivist sociology. In 1920, Florian Znaniecki set up the first department in Poland. The Institute for Social Research at the University of Frankfurt, later to become the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, was founded in 1923. International cooperation in sociology began in 1893, when René Worms founded the Institut International de Sociologie, an institution later eclipsed by the much larger International Sociological Association, ISA, founded in 1949. Theoretical traditions. Classical theory. The contemporary discipline of sociology is theoretically multi-paradigmatic as a result of the contentions of classical social theory. In Randall Collins' well-cited survey of sociological theory, he retroactively labels various theorists as belonging to four theoretical traditions: functionalism, conflict, symbolic interactionism, and utilitarianism. Modern sociological theory descends predominantly from functionalist, Durkheim, and conflict-centered, Marx and Weber, accounts of social structure, as well as the symbolic interactionist tradition consisting of microscale structural, simul, and pragmatist, Mead, Cooley, theories of social interaction. Utilitarianism, also known as rational choice or social exchange, although often associated with economics, is an established tradition within sociological theory. Lastly, as argued by Rowan Connell, a tradition that is often forgotten is that of social Darwinism, which brings the logic of Darwinian biological evolution and applies it to people and societies. This tradition often aligns with classical functionalism. It was the dominant theoretical stance in American sociology from around 1881 to 1915 and is associated with several founders of sociology, primarily Herbert Spencer, Lester F. Ward and William Graham Sumner. Contemporary sociological theory retains traces of each of these traditions and they are by no means mutually exclusive. Functionalism. A broad historical paradigm in both sociology and anthropology, functionalism addresses the social structure, referred to as social organization in among the classical theorists, as a whole and in terms of the necessary function of its constituent elements. A common analogy, popularized by Herbert Spencer, is to regard norms and institutions as organs that work towards the proper functioning of the entire body of society. The perspective was implicit in the original sociological positivism of Comte, but was theorized in full by Durkheim, again with respect to observable, structural laws. Functionalism also has an anthropological basis in the work of theorists such as Marcel Mauss, Bronislaw Malinowski, and Radcliffe Brown. It is in Radcliffe Brown's specific usage that the prefix structural emerged. Classical functionalist theory is generally united by its tendency towards biological analogy and notions of social evolutionism, in that the basic form of society would increase in complexity and those forms of social organization that promoted solidarity would eventually overcome social disorganization. As Giddens states, functionalist thought, from Comte onwards, has looked particularly towards biology as the science providing the closest and most compatible model for social science. Biology has been taken to provide a guide to conceptualizing the structure and the function of social systems and to analyzing processes of evolution via mechanisms of adaptation. Functionalism strongly emphasizes the preeminence of the social world over its individual parts, i.e., its constituent actors, human subjects. Conflict theory. Functionalist theories emphasize cohesive systems and are often contrasted with conflict theories, which critique the overarching socio-political system or emphasize the inequality between particular groups. The following quotes from Durkheim and Marx epitomize the political, as well as theoretical, disparities between functionalist and conflict thought respectively. To aim for a civilization beyond that made possible by the nexus of the surrounding environment will result in unloosing sickness into the very society we live in. Collective activity cannot be encouraged beyond the point set by the condition of the social organism without undermining health. Émile Durkheim, The Division of Labor in Society 1893. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended, either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large, or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, The Communist Manifesto 1848. Symbolic Interactionism. Symbolic interaction, often associated with interactionism, phenomenological sociology, dramaturgy, interpretivism, is a sociological tradition that places emphasis on subjective meanings and the empirical unfolding of social processes, generally accessed through microanalysis. This tradition emerged in the Chicago School of the 1920s and 1930s, which prior to World War II had been the center of sociological research and graduate study. The approach focuses on creating a framework for building a theory that sees society as the product of the everyday interactions of individuals. Society is nothing more than the shared reality that people construct as they interact with one another. This approach sees people interacting in countless settings using symbolic communications to accomplish the tasks at hand. Therefore, society is a complex, ever-changing mosaic of subjective meanings. Some critics of this approach argue that it only looks at what is happening in a particular social situation, and disregards the effects that culture, race, or gender, i.e. social historical structures, may have in that situation. Some important sociologists associated with this approach include Max Weber, George Herbert Mead, Irving Goffman, George Homans, and Peter Blau. It is also in this tradition that the radical empirical approach of ethnomethodology emerges from the work of Harold Garfinkel. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is often referred to as exchange theory or rational choice theory in the context of sociology. This tradition tends to privilege the agency of individual rational actors and assumes that within interactions individuals always seek to maximize their own self-interest. As argued by Josh Whitford, rational actors are assumed to have four basic elements. The individual has 1.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.